European Union has published the mandate which will guide its negotiation with the UK in the post-Brexit trade talks. The document has been shaped by the member states. Some have been forced to compromise on individual priorities, but some bits have been toughened up. And there are a number of potential flashpoints.
The EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, posted on Twitter today that the bloc is united and ready to go. The UK government says it will publish its plans on Thursday, and it says it is equally united. With the departure of Sajid Javid, the UK government is now the Vote Leave government writ large, and this time you suspect there will not be any dissenting voices on what Britain's strategy should be. So let's bring in Georgina Wright from the Institute for Government. I know you've pored through this document today. Georgina, what do you think are the major flashpoints?
I think actually there aren't that many changes between the draft EU mandate that was published at the beginning of the month and this finalised mandate that was published today. But there are some interesting tweaks. The first is that yes, future relationship negotiations matter, but so does the application of the withdrawal agreement. So concretely that means how is that cooperation between Ireland and Northern Ireland going to work? Member states are worried about that and will be looking at that closely. I think there was some hardening of the language, particularly around fisheries. You'd expect that, that France have been very vocal that they would be trying to protect fishing interests in France, but also other member states as well. And there was sort of a lessening of the language around a bespoke arrangement around aviation and space cooperation. So again, it will be interesting to see how that pans out. But there were also some positive signs about cooperation in the space of global pandemics and also in the fight against climate change. So it is interesting to see what the EU has prioritised this time around.
Let's talk about level playing field, because the idea is that the UK would sign up to existing common standards in a whole load of policy areas, and that might sound to UK ears that it's too much like Britain having to carry on following EU rules.
Yeah, so certainly that is a key concern for the UK government. Now, what was interesting in this mandate is that it doesn't say same standards, but it says corresponding high standards, using the EU standards as a benchmark. Now, I think what that suggests is that member states are worried about divergence over time. So if, say, in 5 years' time there's a little bit of divergence, well, you're sort of more or less at the same level. But what if in 10 years' time you've diverged from where you were 5 years ago? That benchmark back in 2020 was radically different. So there is some suggestion that it's not the same standards, but you have to find a mechanism to sort of re-evaluate divergence and how you quantify that divergence going forward. But certainly I think that's going to be one of the key flashing points, because the UK government has said, look, we're leaving the single market and customs union. That's because we want to do things differently. So again, it will be a matter for negotiation.
Georgina, when you look at this this mandate from the European Union and you set that against, as Christian said, the fact that Sajid Javid has left and this is now a fully Leave government that Europe is dealing with, are we inching closer to the possibility of a no-deal Brexit after all?
I mean, I think from the EU's perspective, they are dealing with the government, the current government, the government in question. And actually, when you go around EU capitals, they say, to a certain extent, there's some relief that actually the government has a majority in Parliament, that maybe on the sort of passing that deal through the UK Parliament side of things will be easier. It's really on the EU side that there might be more hurdles, because yes, the Commission is negotiating on behalf of the 27 member states, but depending on the kind of agreement and what areas of law it covers, it might be that national and regional parliaments of EU member states will have to vote on it. And then you have all sorts of voices. You have the European Parliament that wants to be much more assertive this time around. So many more EU voices adding to the mix, and in a very short space of time. I mean, we only have until the end of the year to not only negotiate a deal, but pass it too.
And we are already nearly in March. Georgina, thank you very much for joining us. Georgina Wright there.